From the wild world of short course off-road racing to the long-distance desert racing to the weird world of sprint car racing, our guest has done it all. Hang on, it's going to be one hell of a ride. Hey everyone, it's Wes from 4x4 Canada. I grew up in a 4x4 family. According to my mom, my first word was Bronco, not mom or mother. Kids had posters of girls or athletes on their walls. I had posters of monster trucks and truck poles and mud boggers. I have over 20 years experience in 4x4 shops and many more than that in the off-road racing circles. I've been involved in 4x4 and racing clubs in BC, Alberta, and Ontario. Now I've decided to share my passion with you. I just want to remind everybody about our socials. You can check us out at 4x4canadapodcast.com. On Facebook and Instagram, we got 4x4 Canada Podcast, as well as our sister channel on YouTube at Vintage 4x4 Canada. Hey, everybody, before we get into this episode, I just want to apologize for the sound quality. I'm not sure exactly what the issue was, and I'm still trying to figure that out, but I needed to get this episode out. This is our third episode, and I'm obviously still learning. And this one's kind of got me stumped with the feedback on my mic. I haven't had that before, and I haven't had that in the interviews I've done after this one. So if there's anybody out there that's good at this audio stuff, I can definitely use your help on that. And once again, I apologize. I hope you still enjoy the episode, and we'll go from there. Our guest today grew up in the BC off-road racing circles. He's raced everything from local tough truck races to the big desert races in the States. His top-notch fabrication skills, along with driving ability, has put him in the winner's circle in everything from pro arena trucks to long-distance races, and even lately in sprint cars in his roundy-around pavement car. Dale Nyeste, welcome to the 4x4 Canada podcast.
Hey, Wes.
Thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on here. It's great.
So you and I have been friends for many, many years, and our parents both were racing in the 70s, and they were involved in the four-wheel drive clubs together. And your parents also owned a 4x4 shop. And so you not only learned from them the driving skills, but the technical know-how about vehicles. And you're obviously a smart and technical guy, so you're able to take that knowledge, but you're also able to expand on it into your own racing. You know, you're a really good fabricator, and some of the race car fabrication that you've done is on par with something you'd see in race car fabrication shops in the States and that. So you've definitely learned from racing, and you've also definitely learned from the 4x4 world and brought that back in there. So you've been in racing for a long time. Obviously, you grew up in it. Like I say, started with the old Goose Lake play days and traveling around and doing the sand drags and the obstacle course and that, and your parents. And, I've got pictures of you and I sitting on our dad's laps and doing the kids obstacle and stuff like that. And the kids races and which were always a great time. And, then you guys sort of progressed, your family sort of progressed into the distance racing and with your dad's Bronco and then eventually the Ford 4x4 and the Class A truck, etc. So you started racing in your teen. You did a lot of co-driving before that.
When I was 13. That was the legal co-driving age, was 13 back in the 90s.
Yeah. So I can remember you riding with your dad and riding with Craig Humphreys and
I really remember riding with Craig.
Yeah, with Craig, you were involved in the rollover with Craig, weren't you?
Yeah, that was like probably one of the bigger crashes that's ever happened in this area.
So basically, Craig Humphreys, who started up Baja North in Kamloops, he had a club, what we basically call a Class 3 Jeep CJ7, and he did a really nice job on changing it over to a YJ clip and a great looking vehicle. And then he decided to go out and take you for a ride and roll it over and damage it. So
first lap of the first race, first time I ever co-drove in a race was the first lap, first ever. Yeah. Then I didn't even pre-run. He pre-ran because they didn't have enough seats in the truck they were pre-running in, so I didn't even get to pre-run. I was just along for the ride, and Craig missed a corner, and we just went straight instead of turning, and that was the end of it.
First lap of the first race. That's awesome.
First lap of the first race. Yeah, and I was just riding. He was just teaching me a lesson is all he was doing.
Yeah, exactly.
He was showing me what not to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah, exactly. back in the day, we had some really great races here in Kamloops. The enduro races. We did some short course races and that, but the enduro race is basically a 3 hour enduro, and basically whoever gets the most laps in that course of the 3 hour, wins the race.
Yeah,
And but it was pretty basic in regards to classes. You had your pro buggy and sportsman buggy, and your pro truck and your sportsman truck, and but it was just good, simple fun.
yeah,
That's
that's all it was.
yeah, that's what I remember. I mean, there's guys that had some beautiful vehicles, like your dad's truck and a few of the other the buggy guides. There's some really gorgeous buggies that used to come out, and fast buggies
Yeah,
as well. We'd get your local guys, and then also we get a lot of the guys up from the states. The Hart family and Roger Cadell and Tim
yeah,
Gladley, and
yeah,
you get your local guys like Calvin McKenzie, and there's
yeah.
some good fast buggies there, and there's some good
There was.
trucks. Yeah, good
Yeah,
trucks come
Rick
out too.
Hoxtra was another one. Rick Hoxtra had a
Yep.
fast buggy. There's lots of names back then.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
it seemed to be a really fun. Like, it was just, I don't know. Everybody had, there's also a lot of guys that had, $2,000 trucks or buggies, and just
yeah,
out having fun.
yeah,
And you pull into the pits, and there's 10 people onto your vehicle to try and figure out what's going on. And,
yeah.
everybody's having a beer afterward together. And that to me were some of the best racing
It
and some of
was.
the
Yeah,
best times.
yeah,
It's,
yeah. It went like you say, all the way from like a John Stevens in a very sportsman class buggy right up to pro class buggies that came from the states, and everyone ran together and everyone had a good time.
yep.
There was never
Yep.
issues. No one ever, you know,
It,
got mad at
yep.
each other. Nothing. It was just a fun series, and it went for years.
Yeah, yeah, and you get a lot of there's no egos as well. You
No,
get somebody that is in one of the sportsman class buggies, and they pull in and they're having problems, and you get the pit crew from the pro guys are in there helping out, trying to figure out because they want to see him
that's right.
finish.
Yeah, yeah.
And
There's always good battles. They had some night races. They had some distance races too in Bachelor Heights. Some long
yeah,
distance races. They had a long distance night race. I remember that race. That was the first race I went back co-driving after the wreck in the Jeep. I rode with my dad in that I think it was a 400-kilometer night race or something they had in Bachelor Heights. So
I forgot about that one. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I totally
that
forgot about
was in
that.
the propane powered class 4.
Yeah,
That was
yeah, no, I forgot about the night race. That was
yeah,
yeah, I hadn't thought about that one in years.
yeah,
But so you did some co-driving for a few years while you were a teenager,
yeah,
and then you got into racing yourself, and that was the Ford F-150 4x4. Let's
yeah.
talk a
The
little bit about
propane
that
powered.
truck.
Yeah, yeah. The propane powered one. My dad uh, and Craig and those guys built back in the late 80s, early 90s, and took to the Baja 1000 in 90 and 91. That was my first race truck when I was 18. My dad had rolled it over in a tough truck competition, and he was building his new truck at the time. So he took all the good stuff out of that truck, finished building his new truck, and I bought what was left of that truck and put enough stuff together to put a race truck together out of his old stuff. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and then basically you ran, like I say, you and I went down to Bellingham, Washington. We raced down to Hannigan and the enduro down there,
yeah,
and you did some more local races,
yeah. The Bronco
and
Busters and the Rose,
yeah,
and yeah,
yeah, yeah. It was a good, definitely a good time for sure.
yeah,
And so that truck, from my understanding, like I know that you sold it and it's gone through a few people, and we just want to put a feeler out there that if anybody knows where that truck is, Dale is
yeah.
interested, and Dale would like to have it back.
Yeah, like to
And
buy it back. It ended up down in the Lower Mainland last time I heard, but it's never ever raced since. It was a street legal truck. When I had the truck, I had actually turned it street legal because I didn't have a truck and trailer, so I ended up driving the truck to school. That was my daily driver, was my race truck, and I drove it to high school and raced it on the weekends at the enduros, and then drove it back to high school Monday morning. Like that was I didn't have a truck and trailer or any way of getting it around, so that's
that's
how I
awesome.
raced. Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah,
but
that's
yeah, it's around
showing
somewhere.
showing up to school in your race truck on a Monday morning.
Yeah, had to
That's
wash it
pretty
from the
cool.
night before and make sure it was clean so I could drive to school the next day. Yeah.
That
Take the number plates. I had removable number plates on the cage, so I didn't have numbers on it when I was driving it to school. So
yeah.
yeah,
Awesome. So yeah, no, if anybody knows, where that truck is, it has been floating around for a few years, and it'd be really
yeah,
neat to get that back and just, make it into a, another little street legal pre-runner truck again. And,
yeah. The
it
last
was
year
a,
I had it, I converted it from propane to gas, so it's a gas truck now. But it's just a
yeah,
87 and 91 short box and caged, and it ended up in the Lower Mainland last time I heard anyway. So I kind
yeah,
of know the guy's name. I kind of know the guy's name, but I don't know if it's him who still has it. So
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it'd be a neat little truck. Just there's lots of memories on that truck. So anything from when your dad raced it right up to when you rebuilt it from
yeah,
a pile of parts
yeah,
and raced it yourself. So I mean, it's got a lot of
yeah,
history in your family.
yeah,
So it'd be a neat rig to get back. And
for
then
sure.
after that, you moved into what I nickname your 316 Bronco.
Yeah,
And let's talk a little bit about that.
yeah. It was kind of built for fun because we heard the tough trucks are coming to Kamloops, and we thought, well, we should buy a Bronco because they work good in the tough trucks and put it together and race it in the tough truck competition. So we bought a $600 Bronco, took it to the shop, caged it, put some ranchos on it, did some suspension work to it, and then took it to the monster truck show, and then we won the both nights in the monster truck show in Kamloops, and they paid pretty good money. So we thought we'll drive to Prince George, and we won both the nights in Prince George, and then. And then it got parked. It basically got parked for a good year at Craig Humphrey's house, actually, and then sat in his yard for a year because I didn't have room at my place to put it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and
And
then
then
it
then
turned
they
into the
started
horse
off
racing.
the core racing,
Yeah,
KORR, Camels Off Road Racing out at Whispering Pines in
Whispering Pines.
Kamloops. Yeah, and they had a little short course track out there by the motocross track, and
Yeah,
they ran that for probably almost 10 years, I guess, that track
that
out
was a good
there.
10, 11 years. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. And I ran the Bronco out there for a while, and we took it from a tough truck, which was a pretty much a cheap Bronco with a steel body and everything else, and stripped it right down to nothing and made it nice and lightweight and added a bunch of stuff to it to short course race and
yep.
yeah, had fun with
And
it for a few years.
and that was like an 80 to 96 Bronco, just for the
Yeah,
listeners, in the full size with a twin traction beam front end. And,
yeah,
I know you started with an 80 to 86 bullnose front end on it, and
yeah,
you eventually changed up into the 92 to 96. And
yeah, yeah. When we went short course racing, we put fiberglass body panels on it. So when I got all the fiberglass body panels, I just got the 92 to 96 body for it. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And it was a sharp looking Bronco. Ran it with the Rough Rider colors for a few years, and
yeah,
the classic Rough Rider, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's not. I don't
yeah.
think there's a better paint job out there other than
No,
maybe some of the ones Ivan Stewart's had.
yeah, exactly. And because it was a Ford and I had beef Goodrich tires, I thought I better paint it the Rough Riders colors.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah,
you ended up selling that Bronco, and it raced, for a number of years after you sold it,
yeah,
and then you ended up doing some racing with Richard in his Ivan Stewart Pro Truck,
yeah,
and let's talk about that a little bit.
yeah, yeah. Good friend of mine bought a Ivan Stewart Pro Truck off Rick Johnson down in the States. Toyota. There's only like two Toyota Pro Trucks ever made. The one that Ivan Stewart had, or three, I mean, the one Bill Dosla had, and the one Ivan Stewart had, and the one Rick Johnson had. I think those were the only three Toyota Pro Trucks ever made. Rich Bashan bought one, and I ended up racing with him, co-driving in races like the Parker, right up to driving the truck with him in the mid 400 and Vegas to Reno and that kind of stuff. And we followed the Best in the Desert series for a bit with that truck.
Yeah,
So that was
and the Pro Truck is basically a spec truck.
yeah,
For those that aren't aware, it's basically they're all the same frame. There's the suspension is all the same. I think they have a
yeah.
different motor. You're allowed to
That's it.
have
Yeah,
whatever body style. If you have a Ford, you're allowed to have a Ford motor and
yeah,
etc. But other than body and motor, all those vehicles are identical. So it really makes it a racer's
yeah. It was
race, a driver's
right
race,
down to
basically.
they all had turbo 400 transmissions. Didn't matter if you had a Toyota or Ford or anything. They're all turbo 400s and Crispin 9 inches and Bilstein shocks. And at the time we were running, it was Yokohama Tires was the sponsor for the class. So it was everyone had to run a 15 by 7 Alcoa wheel with a 35-inch Yokohama tire. It was all equal. There was no other than, like say, the look, and that was it. So
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
I mean, it really makes it a driver's race, and it also, you know, both on skill but also on preparation as well too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
and
had a lot of fun. We raced that for quite a while, and as a Toyota, and we did pretty well with it. But the Toyota motors were quite expensive to rebuild, so Rich ended up going to a Ford. So it was reskinned with a Ford body and Ford motor, just
yeah.
to keep it cheaper, more or less. And
Now,
yeah,
I know he bought it off of Rich Johnson down to the state, Rich Johnson of the States, and you guys went down. You raced the first race down down there, and you had a
yeah,
little bit of a an exciting race.
yeah.
Bring us up to speed on that one.
Well, it was kind of it was actually a fun couple of weeks because we Rich had bought the Pro Truck. We went to California to pick it up, and we thought, well, while we're in California picking up the Pro Truck, it's the weekend after is the Parker 425, so let's just drive over to Parker and race a 425. And on the first lap, one of the first high speed sections, Rich was getting used to the truck still because he had never raced the Pro Truck. We just went testing a couple of times with Rick Johnson out in the desert, just testing with the truck, and then we went to the Parker. But yeah, it was only about 40 miles, 30 miles into the first lap, and we got hit from behind from a Class 1 car and ended up going off the track, rolling down the desert with the Class 1 car rolling with us. And we ended up on our side, but we ended up getting back on our wheels and got all the fluids refilled and continued on. But we finished the race. I think there's 12 pro trucks or something. We finished ninth, eighth, or ninth or something. So we thought we did pretty good in our first race ever in a pro truck. And
No
then
doubt.
brought it back, rebuilt it because it ripped most of the body off when we crashed, and then started running the Mint 400 with more the next year and everything, and had a lot of fun with it. That was a lot of years of fun with that truck. So
Yeah, it definitely was a really strong truck, and it you know, you guys also, you know, or Rich also ran short course in that truck as well up in Kamloops.
yeah,
More
not very
for
often.
yeah, a few times, and it's just
Yeah,
more for fun and just to get some
yeah,
seat time
yeah.
and
He
have
had a pro class, like kind of a short course 2-wheel drive short course truck that he ran, and
right,
he
right,
hurt himself one time, so he let me run the 2-wheel drive pro truck for the weekend, and it
nice.
was the same weekend I ran a sportsman class truck for a guy, local guy, and I ran a mini truck for a local guy and a pro truck for a local guy. And I finished every lap of every heat. I think I was the only one ever to run 3 classes and finished every lap of every race at the Core BC short course that weekend. So was,
That's pretty awesome. Now,
yeah,
you're one of the very few Canadians that have raced short course and distance racing, and there's a huge difference between the two. And a lot of guys have either just ran short course or they've just ran distance racing. Um, it's a different vehicle setup, it's a different vehicle prep, and a whole different driving mentality
yeah,
and experience. So the let's talk about short course racing and the vehicle setup and the vehicle and the driving on the short course racing.
yeah, yeah. So much different than desert racing because you're building the truck first of all to be super 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 light. You're not building anything extra that you need on it. You're carrying only as much fuel as you need. You're It's got to be tough enough to last the race, and that's it. So if you're going to race 20 minutes or half an hour, and that's all it's got to last that weekend.
Yep.
So
And it's gonna be
you
low, and you know there's
yeah,
no spare tires. Everything's, you know,
that's
set
right.
up just right,
Yeah,
but you keep it as low as possible. And
yeah.
then the driving style and driving and mentality of the driver is totally different as well.
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah. And the short course truck, you only run one of everything: one fuel pump, one ignition system, one because you're running it super light. Where the desert, you run two of everything: two batteries, two, you know. But yeah, your driving style is different. Again, it's the short
Yep.
course stuff. You're aggressive. If you're not aggressive, like as soon as that green flag drops, you got to go. There's no holding back, waiting for that opportunity like you do in desert racing, where a guy, if you follow him long enough, he might screw up. Short course racing, you can't. You got to either make that guy in front of you screw up, or as soon as he does make a little move, you got to put your truck in the hole. Like it's
Yeah.
way more
It's
aggressive.
I've often explained the to people the short course racing is like a mixture between sprint car racing and motocross.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it's
it's exactly what it is.
you're wide open and you're jumping, you know, going through jumps at the same time. And
Yeah,
and it's a totally different aspect from the desert racing, where, like you say, you're a bit more patient, and you have to be
yeah.
a bit more patient. There,
You have to be. Yeah,
as we had Steve McCrossan on last week, who just ran the Nora race in his Bronco earlier this year, and he came from he's raced short course for probably 20 years, and this is his first desert race and distance race, and he's like, you're not just competing against yourself, you're competing against Baja,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there's so
yeah,
many things. There's everything from the silt and the rocks and the heat.
yeah.
It's a totally different ball game.
Totally is, and you got to be able to turn that on and off. Like it's when you're short course racing, you're watching everybody around you. You're watching those guys make dumb moves and make mistakes, and you're putting your truck where it shouldn't be and trying different things and being aggressive. Or desert racing, you almost forget about everybody that's racing around you, and you're just racing yourself. Like
Yeah,
it's you against Mother Nature. It's not you against everybody around you, because most of the guys around you are in different classes. And lots of times, even
that's
when
true.
someone in your own class passes you, you're going, wow, that guy's going way too fast for this, and then you come around the next corner and he's balled up in the desert, and you go, yep, he was going way too fast for this. You can't
Yeah,
short course race in a desert. You still got to go fast, but you
yeah.
can't be
As
that
as
aggressive.
as Rod Hall said, in order to finish first, you got to finish.
You got to first finish.
That's
Yeah. And that's what it is. And desert racing, I mean, something so stupid and simple in a desert truck, where if you come around a corner and flop it on its side, it can take you hours to get it back on its wheels if no one stops, or if the Best in the Desert crew or someone doesn't come out to rescue you. You could sit there for hours. For a short course, you put it on its side, whatever. They throw the yellow flag, they put you back on your wheels, and you're racing again. Like you're never afraid to roll the truck over in a short course or end up on your roof or your side in a short course, because there's people all around you. There's
mhm.
there's corner crews, there's safety crews, there's everybody there. Desert racing, there's no one around you. You're on your own. You're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the big things with the distance racing is, back years ago when you and I got started on this, we would pre-run a course, and you sort of memorize it and the best that you can. And of course, the
Yeah,
track changes over time, but now they're going to the large. Everything's tracked, and there's no pre-running, and everything's put into a GPS, and you got a big screen on front of you
yeah,
where your co-driver is basically just looking at that screen and
that's
calling stuff out,
yeah.
almost like a rally race for the most part,
Almost,
right?
yeah. He's telling you about corners coming up and skull and crossbones. Like that's the biggest thing in desert racing when you're watching the GPS, the skull and crossbones, and it's like,
Yeah,
where the big G outs are, and where the ditches are, and you hope and you don't know
yeah,
how bad it is sometimes because you haven't been out there yet. And lots of times, because we used to buy our GPS coordinates for the race off of anyone in contingency that had it,
yeah,
race radio people and stuff like that who had any of the coordinates.
yeah. PCI, whoever, yeah.
Yeah,
And going back to the short course racing, a lot of times you'd race, well, especially in Kamloops, you'd have, say, 4 races or 5 races at that same track every year. Ontario's a little different, where they have, you know, say 6 races, and there's like 3 different tracks kind of idea, but they're all basically the same layout every single time. So you get used
yeah,
to a track, and
yeah,
although the tracks do change, in regards to, a track will get worse over time, or
yeah,
it'll get beat up or rutted out or whatever, but everything's basically the same, and you can adjust for that, obviously, but
yeah,
it's a totally different ball game down in in this desert racing.
yeah, yeah. There's certain when you go down to we were doing the Best in the Desert series for quite a few years, and then doing a lot of the same tracks. You would actually memorize some of the sections. It's like, oh, I remember this section. I remember exactly what's coming up now. And it's kind of amazing when you think of a 500-mile desert race and you know what section's coming up next, or you know what's happening next because they run the same roads at the biggest Reno so many times. You're going,
Right.
oh, I know what's coming up next. I remember this part. Or Mint 400 where they're running down some of the power lines and stuff. You're going, I remember this power line road. You know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, you guys were involved in desert racing for a long time down there. The What's your preference? You've ran both. You've ran pro arena trucks. You've done lots of short course stuff, and you've done a lot of desert racing.
yeah.
What's your favorite?
I kind of like short course when everybody's together. If it's really evenly matched trucks, short course
Yeah,
is a lot of fun. That's kind of because it's just so exciting. It's like 10 or 50 minutes of just absolute excitement. when everyone's around. If there's only three trucks and they're spread out, it's not as much fun. But I think that plays a lot in what is the most fun. And I think the short course with everybody around you is the most fun when
Yeah.
everyone's fender to fender and everyone's around you. There's two or three behind you and beside you and in front of you, and I find that a lot of fun. So
Yeah. Just got the adrenaline pumping. So how do you keep calm in a situation like that and just not go, ah!
I don't know. I've never ever I don't even get butterflies really to this day racing. I stay pretty calm, and a lot of times sitting and staging and stuff like that, I can sit in my seat and I put my head back. I can almost fall asleep. Like I've just tried to stay calm, and I never used to as a kid. You used to get all worked up when you're 13 or 14, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but as life goes on, you just and as you start when you start racing, you might get a little bit before the race will butterflies, and that's about it. And then when the green flag drops, you don't even think about that. You're just hammer down
Yeah.
and away you
Game
go.
on.
That's what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, yeah. You don't have time to think about it. So
Yeah, exactly. Now, things have changed, or let's actually go back to talking about some of your previous vehicles. Your black F-150 that you had,
yeah,
that is probably one of my favorite vehicles out of that my friends have had over the years. Let's
yeah.
talk about that little beauty.
Yeah, that was just a pre-runner that I built, and when we'd kind of finished our desert racing with our Class 8, we were running the Best in Desert series with my dad. We'd sold the Class 8 and still had a bunch of stuff left over, and I was working at Baja North at the time building desert trucks and roll cages and stuff, and I thought, well, I wanted to build my own, so I kind of it starts really small and then snowballs, and then after a few years of building a truck, it starts as a I'm just going to build a it was a 96 95 96 F-150 short box. I'm just going to build this for a street truck with some shocks in it, and then before I knew it, it was a full-blown Best in the Desert Class 8 with windows and a dashboard, and it was street legal with kings and bypasses and coilovers and four linked and cone 40 spline cone rear diff and 37-inch project TAs and Walker Evans beadlocks, and it turned into what was supposed to be such a mild build, just went overboard.
Funny how that happens.
I know.
I have to
I
say that is one of my favorites, especially when you had the flare side bed on that.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah. I
that.
started with a flare side, then it went to a fleet side, and then it went back to a flare side when I finished it, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
because I
I,
missed
I
the flare side look.
and you sold that truck and ended up down to the coast, right? But it's still around.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. James Tellerico, the guy who bought it off me, he's a good friend of mine, and he has the truck and babies it. So it's
Does
he's
he
kind of
does he race it down in the Hope race?
he's ran Hope with it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he's only done it once, but it's not really set up for it, being like it's just a kind of an obstacle course kind of race.
Yeah.
The truck
Yeah.
really likes big deserts and open roads, obviously, where it can go really quick, but he has a lot of fun with it.
Good.
So
Good. Yeah. It's a beautiful truck. It
yeah,
really is. And that's one thing, um one thing that you're quite well known for is the twin traction beam front ends on those trucks.
yeah.
You've really got that nailed down where you're lengthening and you're doing all kinds of modifications to those beams. Let's give us a little rundown what you offer as modifications to those beams.
And it's kind of like everyone calls them a cut and turn beam set for
Hmm.
twin traction beam front ends on the 80 to 96 F-150s and Broncos. And it started back when we obviously had our Class 4 truck that we ran in the Baja 1000, building a set for that my dad and them built. And it was kind of cool. And we realized that, oh, it handles really good and it's really tough. And then I started building my own sets for my short course truck and built a few sets for customers when I was working at Baja North. And then I just kind of took that and ran with it even after I'd left there, modifying them and building them myself. And I've got my own CNC table, so I do all my own bracketry and trussing and everything on them. But I
Yeah.
probably sell 6 or 8 sets a year now of cut and turn beams that are, like you say, widened or just
Yeah.
lifted or with radius arms and everything else. So
Exactly. And that's really something neat to see in Canada. I mean, you see lots of them down in, California or whatever, but there's not many people doing that in Canada. And we should mention that, you are owner of Backwoods Off Road here in
yeah,
Kamloops. And you just recently, I guess it'd be last summer, you built a set of beams and converted a early or a 67 style Ford
yeah,
into 4-wheel drive. with
Yeah.
4-wheel drive cut and turn beams,
Yeah, it was a
and
66. It was a guy brought us a 66 Ford, and
that's what it
it was
was. Yeah.
we did a full cut and turn beam kit in the front. We did a full cross member all in it, and did a full kind of Baja style front beam set in a 66 F100, and it was really really cool 4-wheel drive and everything when it was done. It looked really, and he said it's by far one of the best driving trucks he owns.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
looks great going down the road. It just, it's hey, that's a nice looking truck, and then you get looking at it underneath, and like, this is awesome.
yeah, yeah. It's all updated and stuff. It looks really neat. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, good looking truck for sure. Now, the so as we mentioned, you're one of the few people that has done desert racing and short course off road racing, pro arena trucks. You got into the cars a little bit with your Mustangs. You ran some road races and that, and the Knox
yeah,
Mountain Hill climb in your
yeah,
Mustangs. And then you got into some pavement sprint cars, and you've also
yeah,
got a pavement circle track car. Let's hop over into those Mustangs for a sec.
yeah.
What brought you into the pavement circles?
It was just the amount of it that was going on. Like there was off road racing, but it wasn't as much. We'd only race in town the short course stuff 4 or 5 times a year, and to me, I wanted to race almost every weekend. So it was like, well, I'm looking at the pavement races, and I've done the Knox Mountain Hill Climb since 1995 in my truck. I first originally raced it in my desert truck. I lowered it down and put street tires all on and raced the Knox Mountain Hill Climb in that truck. So seeing all the cool cars there and how fast they were and everything, I thought I want to build one of those cars. So I bought a Fox body Mustang back then, and 5-liter 5-speed Fox body, and caged it and put all the road race suspension brakes and stuff in it, and started racing that too. At the same time, I was racing the short course Bronco just because I could race almost every weekend then.
You
Start
have
in May
such
and
an
then
you have such an understanding wife.
exactly. Well, our
Mel
first
Mel
date.
is Mel puts up with a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah. Our first date was the monster truck show that I was racing at. So it was kind of funny because it was when I built the 316 Bronco was our first date, and we went to the Kamloops Monster Truck Show as our first date. So I sat in the stands and I watched a monster truck show. Then it was when it was my time to race. I left her, went down and I raced, and then came back and sat in the stands and watched the rest of the monster truck show. And then I'd go down and race and come back. That was our very first date. So she's pretty much she's pretty much used to it now.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you have to admit, after that first date, she's a keeper.
That's right. Yeah, I was like, well, I better marry her because I don't think anyone else would put up with that.
Exactly.
And she rode with me quite a few times out at Whispering Pines in my Bronco short course racing because it was a 2-seater. She actually went for quite a few rides and rode with me and really enjoyed it. So
Nice,
yeah,
nice. That's good. Um, on the Mustangs, you've had a couple different Mustangs over the years, and so you did the Knox Mountain stuff, and then you did some stuff down at Mission as well, right?
yeah, yeah. Mostly time attack stuff down at Mission,
Right.
just because it was I couldn't really follow the road race circuit as much, trying to race two different kind of things, and the time attack was just a little cheaper and easier. I could still go down road race and
Yeah.
come home without spending 2 days down there and as much money kind of thing. So I I ended up selling the Fox body Mustang because it was a Fox body and didn't handle as good as the newer Mustang. So then I built a what they call an SN95 Mustang for road racing right after that. So
Nice, nice. And then you got into you took another turn and you got into pavement sprint cars.
yeah, that was I kind of got offered a ride by um, a local here that owned a bunch of sprint cars, and he asked me if I'd ever pavement sprint car raced. I said no. He said, "You ever want to?" I said, "Oh, I'd love to. That'd be fun to do." And he said, "Well, I've got a sprint car if you want to bring your fire suit and helmet and everything, and meet me at the track, and you can try it out." And so I spent the first about 4 years sprint car racing one of his sprint cars, and he paid for tires and methanol and everything else, and it was a lot of fun. And then I bought my own because I thought, well, I'm just that type of person. I'd rather have my own stuff and my own equipment, my
Yeah.
own car. I can pull it apart and modify what I want to modify, and it's not owned by someone else. So I ended up buying my own, and it was just run with the West Coast vintage racers in Washington and everything else, which kind of wasn't even vintage racing after a while. Everyone bought new sprint cars, and it just turned into pavement racing, pavement sprint car racing with no wings. They're a non-wing car, so
Right, right.
Yeah,
And then that again, I mean, is totally different than the short course off-road racing. It's the same in that it's a short race and there's people all around you in that, but that's a
yeah,
totally different style of racing. You're talking off-road racing versus pavement racing.
yeah, yeah. Different kind of G forces and different setups and everything else. And we've been battling a little bit with setup stuff this year with the cars and everything, setting them up and redoing them all. But it was uh, this year's been a bit of a struggle with setup, but it's still
Yeah.
fun. But yeah, the driving is totally different. We had a lot of fun last year racing them, and the driving is almost like short course where you see a hole, you're going to put your car there, but you got to be careful because with a short course and the trucks, if you put your trucks there, you're just hitting bodies and you know. But the sprint cars, when you touch tires, someone's going to go for a ride, you know.
Yeah,
So you
very, very dangerous for sure.
you don't want to start sticking your car where it doesn't belong. It's kind of you got to make sure that area is just big enough that you can just barely squeeze your car in there, but not touch the next car because it gets dangerous.
Yeah, no doubt. I remember when I went down to SEMA, I can't remember the exact year, but BF Goodrich had rented out the Las Vegas Speedway, and they had a variety of things. They had a bunch of pre-runners, and they had rock crawlers, and they had the circle track and the road track
Yeah,
and all that. And Al Vanderveld from Canadian Four-Wheel Drive magazine invited me out for an evening with him at this
yeah,
event that was sponsored by BF Goodrich. And so we went out and we taught, we did of course, being 4x4 guys, we went to the off-road section first, and I did, went to a little rock crawl ride with somebody, and then I
yeah,
hopped into a they call it a pre-runner. It's basically a full-blown trophy truck at the time,
for
kind of
sure.
idea. And I went out and it was like some of these top name racers, right? But one of the really interesting things I found is they put us in stock cars. It's basically one level below the NASCAR, and they're two-seat cars, and they had one of these professional drivers going around, and they had us in the passenger seat, and the G-force was just incredible hitting out of those corners.
Yeah,
You think, you watch some of the races, on TV or even in person, and you think, well, they're just turning left, not a big deal, right?
yeah,
But coming out of those corners or even going into those corners, the effects that it has on your body was just
yeah,
mind blowing.
yeah.
And
That's what I
this,
find with the sprint cars.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And I found that maybe it was more pronounced because I was also as in the passenger seat, I'm closest to the wall, and those guys get real close to the wall.
oh yeah, it's going that fast
Especially,
too.
yeah, exactly. Especially when you're on that side of it, right? So
Yeah,
we're talking inches from the wall, and it's the same thing with the sprint car racing too. You guys are, using all parts of that track,
oh yeah,
and it's and you got to be careful of the guys behind you and in front of you and beside
yeah,
you, and
yeah. And the
it's
sprint cars, like they don't run mirrors, so that was something to get used to. Was no mirrors, like you can't see behind you, so you
do
don't
you
know
have a
what's going on
spotter?
behind you.
Do you
No,
guys have a spotter? No spotter,
no,
eh?
no, nothing at all. So it's just all you go off of is hearing who's beside you and who's around you to know what you're doing, basically. So hold your line and hope like hell they kind of know what you're doing and aren't going to run into you. That's about all it is.
That's screwed up.
Yeah, it's totally different.
You know me, I'm not much of a race driver. So I would that's not something I'd want to do myself. Just
No,
I don't know if my skills could tangle with you guys for sure.
it's you got to be the cars are really darty, so they'll go from the top of the track to the bottom of the track in a half a second or a quarter of a second. Like you're not, it's not like a big stock car. Like I've got a late model and the things like driving a big Cadillac and you're coming into stuff and it's everything happens kind of slow. And when you're in a sprint car, there's someone that's on the inside of you, next thing they're on the outside of you, and next thing you're on the outside and he's on the inside, and it's like everything happens so fast. You know, even crashing, we've crashed, and it's you're 1 second you're racing, next second you're climbing up over top someone, you're up into the wall, and it's like holy that happened fast. It's not like some
Yeah.
racing where off-road racing sometimes you can some things happen quicker, but you can kind of see the roll coming or you can see something coming. Where that stuff you don't see it coming sometimes. So
Yeah, I've been in some of the off-road racing. I've been in a couple rollovers, and sometimes it's just like slow mo. It's like,
yeah,
oh, we're going. Like it's
yeah,
just, so slow mo sometimes. Even though on the outside it doesn't look that way, but just mentally it seems
mentally
that
it does.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Now,
totally does.
on the sprint cars, you guys mostly driving by throttle?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
throttle and yeah, you're. it's a lot of it, and there's no transmission, so that's the other thing you get used to. There's no park, there's no reverse, there's no neutral. It's direct drive. So once you're in gear and they push start you, you're going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's totally different than, short course racing or the distance racing we talked about. And it's, whereas in short course racing, you were mostly in a four-wheel drive vehicle. So you got the front wheels to pull you where you need to be. And even
yeah,
a lot of times in short course racing, you are driving by throttle a lot of times on
yeah,
some of the
big
higher,
time.
yeah, on some of your higher horsepower rigs and that. But yeah, that's really interesting. You have a really interesting racing career spanning a lot of different genres.
Yeah, and I think it helps. I think a lot of it, like when I went road racing, I was off road racing at the same time. So when I started road racing, it's the same kind of deal where you're coming into a corner and you're not braking until the last second. You're holding yourself as hard as you can into that corner and then you're braking. Well, I started taking a lot of the stuff I learned road racing and brought that off-road racing, and it made me so much faster. It made me so much faster coming into the corners of the off-road truck where I would finish my race and my brakes were hot, and you'd almost have brake fade in the off-road truck where guys were just coming into corners and coasting. And it's like, why are you coasting into the corner? Like, I'd come
Yeah,
into a corner, sometimes you could pass two or three guys coming into the corner because they were just coasting it. They'd either pull their transmission down and downshift with the automatic and slow themselves down that way, where I wasn't. I was downshifting and I was hard on the brakes.
yeah.
I was probably one of the only off-road guys going through brake pads, and he could smell my brakes after the race. And it's like that's but I learned all that from road racing. So you got to take a little bit from everything you've done, and you can learn a lot from every kind of racing. So
No doubt, no doubt. So you've done, you've done the pavement stuff, you've done the roundy car stuff, or
yeah,
and you've done your off road racing and short course racing and the pro arena trucks and the desert racing and that. If you had somebody walked up to you and said, "I'm going to let you race whatever you want, I'll pay for it," what would be your next thing?
I think I would still enjoy short course racing if there was a good series somewhere. Like I
Hmm.
still like that kind of racing. Um, I think that's what I would probably pick. It's either that or I've never tried. I've always wanted to try, but I've never tried as a wing sprint car on
Oh
the
yeah,
dirt, like a dirt track wing sprint car Skagit kind of stuff. I'd love to try that.
yeah, yeah.
Whether I would pick that, I don't know. I've never tried it, but I think it would kind of be thrilling. So,
Those guys have the biggest balls I've ever
oh
seen,
yeah,
and guys,
yeah,
I yeah, they're sideways. They got, they're up on three wheels or two wheels the whole
yeah,
time, and it's just absolutely nuts. We used to watch a lot of that in person out in Ontario because
yeah.
every small town in Ontario has a circle track and
That's
a
right.
dirt circle
And
track,
again,
and
they're in those wing sprint cars. Sometimes you don't know how they miss each other, and there's no rear view mirrors. It's
it
it's
just blows
kind of
me away.
thrilling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you go to Weekend or you go to Skagit or whatever, and you watch some of those guys, and it's just like, wow, that's
yeah,
impressive. But
yeah,
going back to the short course racing, there's not much in BC. There's the island racing,
yeah.
but I mean that's also a $500 ferry ride each way, and
That's right.
you know
Yeah,
and
we
time,
went down
right?
and raced
So
sprint cars at Western Speedway, which is West Shore Speedway, I guess now, which is closing this year. But we went down there, and yeah, it's an expensive trip to get to the island. And I'm like, geez, like, and they pay us toll money for a sprint car racing. So when we get to the track, they'll give us money that helps cover the ferry costs and everything, where off road
right,
racing isn't. So I'm like, it makes it really tough. Some guys are like, why don't you come down and race here? Why don't you come down and do this? And I race the sprint cars because they don't charge us entry fee, and most of the time they'll give you tow money.
yeah,
So you kind of start going, well, in a racing world, if someone's going to charge you no entry fee and give you money to just show up and race, you don't have to win, you don't have to do anything. You just got to show up and be there, and you get money. It's kind of a no brainer where you're going to go race.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
then nothing against the short course racers, or any of the off road racing in BC over the last 30 years. It's just they haven't had the fan base to support
that's
that.
what it
You
is.
know,
Yeah, it's the fan base and everything else, and that's what basically all the circle track stuff is. They just got such a huge following, and the short course is tough. They got a big following, but it's just a different crowd. It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
different people. Yeah,
Yeah, and the island race, I do want to go back to the island race. I've been over there a few times, and they have a really fun weekend. At people can always check it out at Island Off Road Racing. I think it's .com, but They're on Facebook and that as well. But they've got a really neat race system down there. They've got the mud drags, they got the sand drags, they have obstacle race, they've got the wheel
Yeah,
to wheel racing, and then they also have they have the ladies race, and they've got the team relay races where you have a team of 3 vehicles, and
yeah,
whoever what a team gets around fastest wins. And
yeah,
it seems to be a real fun event down there, and I definitely
yeah,
want to talk to some of the guys and bring them on the podcast as well. And
yeah. Just an
but
old school event.
that's exactly, it's old school, but it's fun. And they've got some good trucks down there. I mean, your dad's former Pro 2, short course truck is down there, and there's a
Yeah,
lot of good trucks. They're not just a bunch of beaters from a bunch of hillbilly rednecks, although there probably is some of those. But there's a
yeah,
lot of good trucks running down, running coilovers and big horsepower, and
big
they're
time.
just out to have fun, right? So
Yeah, they're fast. There's a lot of fast guys down there, and it's like you'd love to build a truck and go down, but I think you'd probably get beat. Like there's a lot of really fast guys down there. I've
yeah,
watched a lot of the videos and seen a lot of the stuff, and yeah, it's the same thing. They combine the balls of the dirt track sprint car racer with an off road truck. It's
yeah,
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 they go for it, and it
yeah,
looks like a lot of fun.
yeah, they always I remember them come up to some of the core races, and it's too bad we didn't see more of them up there, but it's totally the ferry costs and the fuel costs
Yeah,
and stuff like that. But I know when some of the guys would come up from the coast, whether it be the Bronco Buster days of the enduros, or they'd come up for the short course races, they were always very competitive.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Super fast guys. It's a really
yeah,
group of fast guys down there. So
yeah, and it really, it's that's probably the best off-road racing. Well, it's almost the only off-road racing happening in BC right now, unfortunately. And it's
yeah, there's Hope Brigade Days, Hope
yep,
Summer Smash stuff. They do some off road racing.
yep.
So look that
Pe-
up, and it's a lot of street trucks and everything. So which is really cool because they're kind of back to the basics. When it's an obstacle course, it's
yeah,
a
exactly.
little
And in Pemberton, they got a race or two
Pemberton
there
stuff.
every year, and
Yeah,
so it's
and the
definitely, it's almost, the racing here seems to have gotten back more to the grassroots stuff.
it's Hundred
Guy,
Mile House has a horsepower ranch at the 100 Mile House. They're kind of starting to get a little bit of off road racing up there.
yep,
So
and Quesnel as well.
yeah,
Rob
that's right.
Wilkie and the Quesnel 4x4 crew up there, they've got some good racing where it's a little bit of short course style, it's some more of the rock crawler stuff. And they got a combination of different events up there, and I definitely
Yeah,
want to get Rob on and talk about some of his events. And
yeah,
I know there's some guys that are working on building a few trucks to race short course up there as well too. So hopefully
yeah.
they can start to bring that back.
Oh, big
And
time. I wouldn't mind building another truck, and I think if I did, I'd try not to go overboard. I'd try to build it pretty old school. So it's something in the back of my mind, and I've got stuff to build. I just don't have time right now to do it. But I do want to build something and go back to off road racing around
yeah,
BC and just kick it old school, the 2 inch, multiple 2 inch shocks per wheel, and you know,
just
just
have
keep it
fun again.
simple.
Yeah,
That's right. Just have fun again, and that's kind of. I had the most fun in like the 316 Bronco and stuff where it was just built for fun and we had a lot of fun. That was the most fun I ever had.
yeah.
And I always say if you're going to build something you don't care about, just go have fun with it. Don't, you know.
Yeah, when you end up building $100,000 race truck, things get a little different than when you're running something that's $20,000, right?
That's right.
You know,
And which is totally different than when you're running something that's $2,000. Like, and you just the $2,000 one you don't care, and I can guarantee you're going to have the most fun with that $2,000 truck than you are with $100,000 truck. So
totally. One of the things I would love to go to is the Dakar race.
yeah.
That would be something that would be an interesting race, and but yeah, it's just obviously way out of price range for a lot of
Oh, exactly.
normal people.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be too afraid of getting lost out in the middle of nowhere doing that race, but
No doubt.
yeah.
So you've had a lot of vehicles, both, race vehicles and, regular vehicles. What's been your favorite vehicle?
Um,
Or is it too hard of a question?
it's kind of too hard of a question. I like so many of them. I wish I could keep them all, but I actually don't have the room and the space and everything to keep everything I ever own. So
Yeah. Is there one
if
that
I
you really regret selling?
probably the truck we ran, the Baja 1000, the one I drove to high school, all that
Yeah.
stuff. probably the one I regret selling. If I could have any vehicle back, I'd try to have that one back.
Yeah.
And same thing, do it back up to what it was, not to what I'd build my black truck and 4 Lincoln and King coilovers and bypasses. I'd build it back to the Rancho days and the multiple shocks per wheel days, and just have it as a more of a keepsake than anything. But
Yeah, exactly. Once again, we're talking to Dale Nyeste. He's out of Kamloops, BC, and a long time off road racer, and grew up in an off road racing family. And both Dale and his sister own Backwoods Off Road in Kamloops. So if you guys are looking for parts or service or anything like that, definitely give Dale a shout. As we talked about, his experience on the fabrication side is phenomenal. He's got those twin traction beam front ends just dialed right in, and even I don't know how much you guys get into the custom work at Backroads, because I know you kind of sometimes when you do custom work at work, you don't feel like doing it at home. Um,
no, yeah, I don't do anything at home anymore. So used to do a ton of roll cages. I still do a lot of roll cages for the road race guys and all that stuff.
yeah,
A lot of
yeah,
roll cage work and stuff, but not as much as I once did.
yeah,
Down to
yeah.
probably 2 or 3 a year instead of 2 or 3 a month kind of thing. So
The quality of your roll cages and all your fabrication work has all been really super impressive for sure.
yeah.
So, about to close up here, Dale. One last question for you. Who would you like to listen to on 4x4 Canada podcast?
I think I'd like my dad, like Bob Nyeste, more than a lot of people. I think he's kind of one of the pioneers of the sport, and he stuck with it all the way through the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s, right up till I built a Pro 2 truck for myself and didn't. I couldn't finish it because we started having a family and kids and everything else, and he ended up buying the Pro 2 truck off me and finishing it himself and racing it at the Core BC races. So
Yeah.
it'd
Yeah,
be
he's
interesting to,
definitely on my hit list. I mean, Bob
yeah,
Nyeste is he's a pioneer of off-road racing in Western Canada.
yeah,
There's very few people that have been involved as many years, and he's seen
yeah,
it everything. When him and your mom started racing, they raced an early Bronco that was they had a cage in it and some
yeah,
desert dogs on it, and that was basically about it, right?
yeah, like everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't even have Rancho 5000s back then. It
No,
was just a
no,
set of
Gabriel
probably
gas riding.
exactly a bunch of some Gabriel shocks on it and a roll cage and some desert
Yeah, there you
dogs,
go.
and you're all set. And then they started off with the obstacle racing that was so popular back in the 70s, 80s, and eventually
Yeah,
moved right up into the desert racing and racing the Baja 1000. I agree with you. He would be an excellent person to chat with.
yeah,
And,
yeah. I think he raced a Mint 400 back in the 80s, and
yep.
Mint 400 kind of stuff, and yeah, did a lot of stuff back then. I actually
Yeah.
still know where his old race Bronco is. It's sitting in a field.
The old
The
black
old
one.
black. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So in my
there we go.
travels, I've found that. I've found a lot of stuff, but yeah, that's one of the only
Yeah.
things I know where it is. But he's pit crewing for me, sprint car racing and stuff. He's kind of one of my main guys on the pit crew. He pushes me in
Yep.
the quad up to staging and does all that stuff. We bought him a quad to ride at the sprint car races, so he does that. Rides around and pushes me up to the start line now. So
And now he's into the street cars.
yeah,
He's got he's got his Cobra, and he's got a couple street cars now, doesn't he?
yeah. He's in a car shows and relaxing with his friends on the weekends now. So
Yeah.
I
It was
told him I
funny.
don't like car things.
I was at a
I
car
can't
show
sit
a
around.
couple months ago, and talking to him, and I'm like, Bob, I'm looking around, and there's all these old gray haired guys, into the
Yeah,
streetcar scene, and then I'm like, wait a minute, that's me.
yeah, exactly. That's why I built one.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. It's like I never thought I'd build an old truck, and then I built my '71 F100, and I was like, gosh, maybe I'm turning into the old guy. I kind of like my F100.
Well, it's a hell of a lot easier on the body.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah,
I
for
still
sure.
don't go to car shows because I just tell my dad car shows are for old guys that can't race anymore. So
Awesome.
yeah.
And anybody else you can think of that you'd like to see or hear? I
Um.
should.
Yeah, I think Craig Humphreys. Like he's done a bunch of racing himself because he was part of the crew that went down to the Baja 1000, and it's just such a wealth of knowledge in the off road racing in Canada. Going from Port Alberni, like that's where he's from, and watching the races when he was a kid down there.
Yep.
He knows all the racers down there. even if he didn't drive a lot of races himself, he co-drove a lot and drove a bunch of big races. And you know, just the knowledge he has in racing in Canada is phenomenal.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah,
Craig, like say he grew up in Port Alberni watching those island races and moved to Kamloops and worked with your dad as sportsman for drive and
yeah,
started,
yeah,
you know, raced the Baja 1000 with your dad and a
yeah,
number of other big races. And they eventually went on to start Baja North here where they, you know, a lot of fabrication, race car fabrication and that, and
yeah,
as
yeah. He
well as,
taught
you
me a
know,
lot. Like he taught me a lot from working with my dad back when I was 13 and 14 year old, 13, 14 years old about welding and fabricating and bending metal and how
yeah.
what stuff should look like. And I picked a lot up from him. Like he's probably one of the best fabricators I know. And I picked up most of everything I learned from that guy. Like
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
he's definitely a top notch guy as well too. So
yeah,
I definitely want to talk to him. He's retired now, so I don't even know if he'll pick up a phone anymore. He's living up
no,
in the bush.
living in the bush. Yeah, he's hiding from everybody.
I can't blame him.
No,
Beautiful, Dale. I really appreciate you coming on board again, Dale Nyeste from Backwoods Off Road, and we look forward to chatting with you soon. I know we'll get
yeah,
together soon and do some stuff, but
yeah,
I'd like to eventually have you back on, and I got a couple, you know, where we can have some panels on a few different people and talk about a few different things for sure. So